It's about how are you going to improve the lives of the people in the audience through the words you give them. And the value of your speech is how long do they take your message? How long does your message resonate in the minds of the audience? Is it three?
I think all speakers need to know what their currency is. The best currency for any speaker are stories. You collect stories, you've got things to talk about,
But can you share something with those contestants that would like to become more champion or come close to it? What do you wish somebody would have told you when you first decided to start competing?
Well, I mentioned this. It's about being yourself and talking to the audience.
Okay.
It's not about gimmicks. It's not about jumping around on stage. It's not about, and I've seen ladders, I've seen horse mannequins, I've seen orange cones people bring out, trying to make an impression on the audience. It's about oratory excellence. You should be able to close your eyes and listen to the speech and be taken on a journey and not have to look at a guy turn his back on the audience to try to do something somebody else is doing that's different. And so it's not about acting. In acting, you're playing, I mentioned, sorry, you're playing off someone on stage. In speaking, you're playing off the audience. Always you're playing off the audience. As soon as you drop that fourth wall and you play off somebody over here, you disconnect from the audience. So in public speaking is about talking to that audience and taking them on a journey and telling them about the guy on stage, but you're always talking there. And it's about how are you going to improve the lives of the people in the audience through the words you give them. And the value of your speech is how long do they take your message? How long does your message resonate in the minds of the audience? Is it 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, 3 decades? Not a month goes by that I don't get emails from people who either just saw my speech or said, I saw your speech in 2005 and I think of it every day. And I mean, I get a constant trickle. And that lets me know that I did what I wanted to do, is I wanted to help people live a better life. And it's about bringing people together, and it's not about being the smartest guy in the room. It's not about, being the biggest ego or anything like that. It's about giving people something that helps them deal with their life, helps them be more successful in some way, helps them handle the barriers and the confusions of life.
This is beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sure it'll help somebody. And can you also give us, please, 3 best tips to be a phenomenal and memorable speaker? Because you are one, so I figure you must have some best tips in your back pocket. What would they be, please?
All right. Well, the first one is, I think all speakers need to know what their currency is. And I think the best currency for any speaker are stories. You collect stories, you've got things to talk about, you've got examples to draw from, you've got life experience that kind of forms the foundation of your body of knowledge. I think it's a really good habit for all speakers to start collecting stories from their lives, from their days. Anything that you can write down and come back to later on. Story, it's our currency. It's what we cash in every time we're going on stage. So my first tip, collect stories. My second tip would be to get a team. I prefer to call it a team, but it's basically the idea of don't work alone. A speaker has one job and one job alone, that is to go on stage and deliver the material. Somebody else has the job of receiving the material, critiquing the material, deciding whether or not to accept you as a speaker. That's somebody else's job. So it's good to have a circle of trust that can kind of mimic the audience. That is to say, it's good to have people that can show you the things about yourself that you can't see. People who can tell you what you look like when you're speaking so that you can progressively readjust your speaking to a more exemplary mold, if I can say so. So it's good to have support. It could be a coach, it could be a mentor, it could be a team of friends, it could be a Toastmasters club. It's good to have somebody who mimics the role of the audience and tells you what you look like when you're speaking. The third tip, and I hate to sound cliche, but there is no substitute for practice. You can make it more specific though. I try to think of this in terms of principle. One rule I enforce with myself is never cheat the audience. That is to say, if they know you're going to speak, prepare. One rule is I try to never give a speech that is not at least 2 weeks old, or in an ideal setting, a month old. That means I have had the speech ready. I've been rehearsing it for at least 2 weeks. That's how prepared I am to deliver the material. It does help a lot with the nerves, but also I walk off the stage feeling like I did the audience justice. I did all my homework. I did all the writing, all the refining, all the rehearsing. I did everything I could to make sure they could receive value in this moment. So you could think of it principally as well. If you're going to speak, what are the rules of your practice sessions? What are the metrics that you use to label yourself as prepared? So what does prepared mean for you? So there is no substitute for preparation. Those will be my 3 tips, my favorite go-tos when I'm working on a speech.
Wow. Yes. Wonderful. I love those. Oh, I'm going to start writing a speech and I'll be applying all your little tips. And I don't know when that will make me world champion, but I'm sure it'll definitely help. Thank you, Cyril. Since we're trying to get all the best advice out of you, Lance, what is your best advice for someone who has a fear of public speaking and that keeps getting pestered 8 times to go visit a Toastmasters club? Like, they just don't see the value, they don't see the point. What would you like to tell them right now?
Well, the first thing is, as I mentioned earlier, communication is a very hot subject for us human beings. My dog doesn't have any problem communicating. Matter of fact, it's a problem that my dog doesn't have a problem communicating. My dog will communicate to anybody whenever she wants to, okay? As human beings, we have a tendency to do one of 2 things: either shut down or come out with illogical emotional reactions, that we didn't really mean, but we say things on a reactive basis on it. So realize we're dealing with something extremely personal to the individual. It's the essence of who they are and how they interact with the other human beings. So this is something we deal with communication. So I look at speaking like a muscle, and you have to exercise it to have strong muscles. The problem is our muscles are really atrophied, especially our public speaking muscles are atrophied, because we've been told to sit there and shut up most of our life. So you have to get into a place, just like going to the gym, where you start exercising your muscles. And when you start exercising your muscles, what happens? They get sore because you're not using them. Well, you don't get sore speaking. What you do, you get nervous. That's the same thing. Well, if you're going to the gym and your muscles are sore, do you stop? No, you keep exercising them until they start to get strength. They're not sore anymore. So what do you do in speaking? If you're nervous, you keep speaking and build your muscle, and then you won't be nervous anymore. It's the same path that you go through. And the thing with public speaking is it sort of puts your communication under a microscope. Because we can get away with things one-on-one, but when we're in front of even like 10 people, let alone 30, 300, or 3,000, what we say is magnified in every way. And so what I've learned through the process of practicing and working on my public speaking, it's clarified my thinking. Because even when I speak with people one-on-one, I have an opening body and conclusion. I have a specific end point I'm trying to get to, instead of just, we've all had these people just ramble. And no, I have an opening. I have a little bit of a story. I want to connect with you on this. I want to explain why this is important, and I want to bring it to a conclusion. Okay. So it's clarified my thinking, and it's really helped. I can't tell you how much in my one-on-one communication. And it's, the same thing. I know when I was learning to drive, an example, I learned to drive in a 46 Willys Jeep, which is a great vehicle to learn to drive in. I started driving the family station wagon. Then we would rent an RV, and I'd drive the RV. But when I went back down to the station wagon, Oh, that's easy because I'd driven something bigger. Then I went back to the Jeep. This is a piece of cake now because I'm driving something bigger. Well, what happens is when we communicate to a group and we have to go communicate one-on-one, it's easier to communicate one-on-one because I just communicated to something bigger, right? And so it's like that, and that's sort of what I was working on. See if I can get a bigger thing, so I'm more effective over here. But I'm going to do this, so that I'm more effective over, over here, and I can, I can appreciate it. And it all has to do with our ability to recognize what I would say differences and what things of comparable magnitude. It's like, okay, I did something bigger, so this is a little bit smaller. I can do the smaller thing better, and you can apply that to skiing. You have a hard time on this slope, go ski a really steep one. Now this one doesn't seem so bad. Like I said, we talked about relationships. You think this one's bad? Go date that one. That one's really bad. This doesn't seem so bad now.
Just stay right there, sir. Oh,
wow. What would be your best advice for someone who just doesn't feel comfortable pushing record on their phone, on their devices, on social media, in the world, or it's not necessarily just stepping on stage, it's also in meetings at work, and somebody who just doesn't do it. What would be your best advice for them, please?
Well, I've thought about this at length, and I would say something I've never advised before until I thought about this question specifically, because typically I would say practice, be more exposed, get stories, and and all the practical stuff. I feel an even more important step is to analyze that fear and ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? It's important because typically when we can put labels on our fears, we can investigate whether they're merited or not. So for example, I'm worried that I'm going to look silly. Yeah, we can investigate that. Are you really going to look silly? Perhaps you're talking at work. I mean, they hired you. You went through the interview process. They probably trained you even. You're probably, to some extent, a specialist in the field. So are you really going to sound stupid? Probably not. Another fear, people are going to judge me. You can label it so you can investigate it. Are they really going to judge me? And if so, what are they going to judge? What are they going to think? And if so, do I really care? Does it change anything? When we atomize these fears and look at them for what they really are, excuses, we find that the only thing we should really be afraid of is if this message is ready, is if it's ripe, is if it's good enough to give. I feel that's one fear I never want to let go of. I always want to be afraid and kind of nervous about whether what I'm about to say is ready, is mature, is ripe enough to be presented to an audience, because then I know that my heart is with the audience. And it's not about myself. It's not about how I look, how I sound. It's really about these people that I'm speaking to. So for anybody who's confronting this fear of public speaking, I would say that label what you're confronting. What is it that you're really afraid of, and investigate it. Many times you'll find that your fears are easily dismissible and replaceable with healthier fears, fears that are actually going to propel you to be a more impactful speaker.
I feel like saying amen to that. Yes, it's so true. This fear of being judged. Yes, they're not rational necessarily, but they cling to us, right? And they paralyze us, and they're in our way of so many opportunities. Mm-hmm.
It's a survival instinct, really. And a survival instinct is really about caution. It's about saying, don't get close to the edge of the cliff, rather than, going over the cliff. I'm going on tangents here, but it's a survival instinct. It's your brain trying to ensure that you are as safe as possible, as far away from the edge of the cliff as possible. But the best view is right there at the edge of the cliff. You've got to get up there to the edge of the cliff to get the view. So, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love this. I'm going to put myself on the edge of that cliff. I have work to do. But yes,